nation's capital on a beautiful spring day. This is Summit on Sports. We're coming to you live from the historic Government Conference Center here in Ottawa, where many of Canada's constitutional debates have been waged. But today, we'll be hearing debate on a question that seems to spark almost as much passion. Good afternoon, I'm Mark Lee. Welcome to a special presentation of CBC Sports and CBC News World on the future of amateur sports in Canada at this weekend's first ever National Summit on Sports. Over the next 2 hours, we'll get details from the summit and talk to some of the key players. My co-host is Nancy Wilson of CBC News World, and she joins me now from the site of the summit.
Thanks, Mark. I'm here at the Westin Hotel. That's about a 400-meter sprint from Parliament Hill. And gathered in this room behind me are nearly 300 people who have devoted their lives to sports or have at least had a role in how well we play the game. They are the athletes and coaches, the bureaucrats and politicians, including the Prime Minister, who, as we know, is an avid skier and golfer. This summit is really the culmination of a process that began nearly a year ago when the Federal Minister for Amateur Sport, Denis Coderre, began touring the country for a series of 6 regional conferences. And what he learned really, Mark, set the agenda for the meeting here in Ottawa this weekend.
That's right, Nancy, and this is what Coderre put on the table, a discussion paper called Towards a Canadian Sport Policy. It asks for solutions to some serious problems that affect everyone from kids in phys ed classes to elite athletes training for the Olympics. And he aims to back the talk with action and legislation this fall. The sports minister has just finished his closing remarks at the summit. And Nancy, there have been some significant announcements made, I understand.
No doubt about it, Mark. There's been real news made, and you can see the people behind me. They are giving Denis Coderre a standing ovation as he wraps this summit. That gives you a sense of the rather positive reaction from the initiatives announced today. For starters, we're talking about more money for elite athletes to help them prepare for Olympic competition, more of an emphasis on fitness and sports at the community level, and a real push to change the way the sports system in this country is actually run. Here's a quick march through the highlights of what has been announced so far. Starting with a $10 million funding increase. This means an annual Sport Canada budget of $95 million for the next 5 years. That is an all-time high. A new sports policy to be implemented within a year, and a new group of people brought in from all branches of sport to rebuild Canada's sports system. A special fund dedicated to Olympians going to Salt Lake City, $1 million from the federal government and $1 million from other sources. And as we mentioned, Denis Coderre has just finished wrapping this summit, and certainly he was talking in his closing remarks about a new awareness and a sense of history. Here's some of what he said just a moment ago.
For the first time ever, all the stakeholders forget their little fights, forget their little handout, forget their little jurisdiction. And they want to talk, they want to work, they want to get their act together. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very, very proud to be your spokesperson. I'm just a link. You're my energy. You build the bridges, you make the difference, and we will make it happen.
So, as Denis Coderre says, he's going to go on the road again and do continuing consultation, Mark. And a reminder, we will be speaking with Denis Coderre later in the program. And as well, our viewers will have a chance to chat with Mr. Coderre on the web right after our program. You can find more details on our website. That's at cbc.ca/sports.
Nancy, this afternoon we'll also have the results of a special opinion poll on such questions as how much money should be spent on sports, should it be spent on developing Olympic athletes, or building new facilities in your communities. And we asked people about Canada's performance at last year's Sydney Summer Games. The poll produced some truly surprising results.
Mark, surprising and revealing. When you think of course, poll results are all about numbers. So too are sports results, the score of the game, the time of the race, medal counts at the Olympics. But many believe the most important numbers are always with dollar signs, but you get what you pay for. For Canadians, the numbers game appeared especially evident at the Olympics in Australia last fall.
Canada.
36. That was one prediction of the number of medals Canadian athletes would win at the Sydney Olympics.
It was a bold target. After all, the 22 medals Canada won 4 years earlier in Atlanta was our best performance to date in a non-boycotted games.
Simon Whitfield is going to do it. Simon Whitfield has moved into the lead.
Yet it all seemed so possible when Simon Whitfield won that first gold medal on just the second day of competition. 36? Just maybe.
Simon Whitfield has provided Canada with its first gold medal.
But the glory of that first gold medal became lost in a steady stream of missed opportunities and disappointing results.
The speed, Dubnikov isn't going to do it. Dubnikov's being eliminated here in the quarterfinals of the Olympics, and that is a huge surprise.
Rooney Stern pulled up about 50 meters into the race.
David Ford won't be going to the finals. He is the world champion, but today just wasn't his day.
Oh, no! Porter will be fourth.
Canada won 14 medals in Sydney. The team voted the friendliest at the Olympics suddenly had some unfriendly things to say.
I think the big thing with that has to do with finances. I mean, if you look just, for example, Australia, comparing ourselves to Australia, in the 80s, we were very close, and now all of a sudden, you know, they've pulled way ahead of us in swimming, and for their budget is $8 to $10 million a year for swimming alone, and for Canada, it's $2 million. So, you know, you can't expect the same amount of results if you're not putting in the same amount of money. It's an investment, you know, and you have to sort of be patient and wait for it to pay off.
And with that, the system responsible for amateur sports in this country became our favorite whipping boy even before the Olympics were over.
There is a systemic problem. What we're talking about here is the Canadian sports system is basically piecemealed itself in the last 10 years. We don't have a system, we don't have a plan, we don't even have a target for where we want to go to.
Maybe our expectations were too high. Or maybe the results weren't that bad. After all, Canada had more top 8 finishes in Sydney than in Atlanta. What is clear, though, is that the Canadian performance in Sydney crystallized what athletes, coaches, and sport administrators have been feeling for some time, that the amateur sports system in this country needs to change.
It's a system funded largely by the federal government, almost $84 million this year. Most of that money, some $44 million, goes to the country's sports federations. There are 38 of them that get federal money, running sports from athletics to swimming. $25 million goes to hosting competitions here at home. And this year, $14.5 million will go directly to Canada's amateur athletes. Here's how that $14.5 million is divided. 799 of the very best will get $1,100 a month. 464 developing athletes will get $500 a month. Some athletes say it's tough to get by on that amount. Sammy Jo Small is one of the very best, the goalie on the Canadian women's hockey team.
My parents have been big supporters, and I definitely could not have done it without them. But it's tough as an independent woman to have to bite your tongue and call home and ask for, you know, a couple more $1,000 to get through, because you can't pay rent, you can't pay for food.
Like many of the amateur athletes we spoke with, Sammy Jo Small doesn't want more money for the sake of just more money. For her, it would mean more respect and appreciation for what she does.
You know, I got a check in the mail from my brother a couple months ago, and it said Olympic Dream Fund on it. And it brought a tear to my eye, because it really demonstrated to me that he realized the struggles and the hardships that we go through.
Then there are athletes like Suzanne Dandeneau. She's a top-ranked weightlifter in Canada, but weightlifters don't qualify for federal assistance payments.
I'd love to say that I'm an athlete, but I'm a person who works, who does athletics on the side, because I can't afford to be an athlete full-time in my current financial situation.
She trains 8 times a week in a remodeled potato shed in Winnipeg. Dandeneau and some other weightlifters originally moved here purely to save money. Since then, it's developed a certain charm that would be tough to leave even if they could afford it. Overall, though, Dandeneau's money concerns are about affording the basics.
I don't need a condominium on the top floor. I need a comfortable place to stay. I need to know that my next meal is available, and I need to be able to focus on what I do. And right now, I try to focus on sport, but there's so many other things in play that it's hard for me to keep that focus.
That focus is harder to maintain when athletes perceive the Canadian Olympic Association is flush with cash. The COA organizes Canada's Olympic and Pan Am teams. To pay for this, the COA has several revenue sources. Here's a breakdown of what the association has earned over the last 4 years. $30 million have come from corporations for the right to use the Olympic logo. $9.5 million have come from grants and donations. And the COA has earned another $34 million through investments. That's a total of $73 million over the past 4 years. Yet athletes directly received only $4 million of it.
They do give us money, and they do help us to achieve our dreams. I just feel there could be more done.
And the COA has more. A $90 million trust fund established after the Calgary Olympics. And for the longest time, the principal amount was untouchable.
The first obligation of the fund is to protect that purchasing power so that it will be there in perpetuity with a constant value in terms of what product it will buy.
But in 1998, the COA reached into its untouchable trust fund when a lottery it was running lost $10 million.
This money that was untouchable, they were able to touch it to pay off $10 million mistake that they made on a lottery, which they've recouped. But this money was untouchable for the athletes.
Beyond the money issues, there's a feeling among athletes that the COA is just too big and out of touch.
I think there's definitely a problem with a big block between the athletes and the COA.
Best in the world.
Clara Hughes won 2 medals in Atlanta. Right now, she's trying to make Canada's speed skating team for Salt Lake City. Hughes has become a very popular athlete, a fact apparently lost on the COA.
I've spoken to people in that office a couple times in a row, and they still don't know my name. I mean, I'm not saying that everybody should know my name, but I think people in that organization should know who they are working for.
It's not just the COA that stands accused of failing to meet the needs of athletes. Federations are responsible for the development of athletes in a particular sport, but they, too, sometimes don't have enough money to do all they should. For example, the Cross Country Ski Federation sent less than half the women's team to a European training camp last year.
Cross-country skiing is not a high-profile sport in Canada, so our government funding, due to our results in the past, is less than a lot of sports, but that's, I mean, just the way things are.
And like the COA, federations are also charged with being out of touch with their athletes. Today, the rings Art Binkowski cares about are diamond. Last year, it was the boxing ring at the Sydney Olympics. 2 months before the event, the Canadian Amateur Boxing Association held a training camp in Hawaii. They sent pretty much everyone except a sparring partner for Binkowski.
If Canada's serious about me or any other of the athletes, of the boxers, winning a medal, provide me with the essentials to go out there, compete with the best in the world, and come up with gold medal.
Athletics Canada was blamed for Bruni Surin's poor showing in Sydney. Surin injured his hamstring at the Canadian qualifying meet just weeks earlier. Critics say the injury was the result of an accelerated schedule of events laid out by the Federation.
You're not pushing hard enough with your left, so therefore your right hand has to dig sooner.
It's not just the athletes who are frustrated, it's coaches as well.
There's no optimism case. I mean, there's only frustration and depression as far as coaching goes. Got to put it down sooner.
Clifford Barry has coached some of Canada's best swimmers, including Victor Davis. But the daily grind wore him out, and he left.
10 fast, 10 easy.
Only recently has he returned to coaching, but not at the elite competitive level.
It's a very, very tough lifestyle with no security, no benefits, not that great amount of money, right? It's a difficult profession where I think there's a huge burnout, and I think it's have to rely on a lot of new coaches coming into the situation to keep it going because everyone else is getting more and more tired from the situation. It's very fatiguing.
So it is obvious some people have lost faith in the system, but Mark, I guess the question people are asking, is there now a national will to reverse the trend?
And Nancy, that's what we tried to find out in our poll, and we'll tell you right after the break what Canadians think about our showing at the Sydney Games. In the meantime, here's what some people think about measuring success in Olympic medals.
Not to make it sound too too much about the medals, but that's what we like to see. Like, we like to see each country come back with a lot of medals.
It's always nice to bring home medals. That's sort of, I guess, the goal of the Olympics is to represent your team and bring home a medal. But no, it's basically doing your best. You always want the Canadians just to have a good showing.
It's not that it's important that they win medals, more so that the government puts money into the programs so that the athletes get a chance to better themselves on the Olympic scene.
Grass, check. Perspiration, check.
The new Maytag Neptune with Stain Brain makes removing stains all but foolproof.
Thanks. Well, at least the new kid's keeping busy.
Now with 6-month supply of President's Choice liquid laundry detergent. Introducing the new Nikon F65. So lightweight and easy to use, you'll never fear SLR photography again.
Guys, switch to Mach 3 with 3 blades for the closest shave in a single stroke. You'll love the difference. And so will we. Mach 3 from Gillette.
Crown Royal. Yes, it's that smooth.
Select road. Validating tires.
What kind of road can you drive on with BF Goodrich tires?
Approved. Enjoy.
Any road you choose. BF Goodrich tires. Take control.
This is our express check-in kiosk. It's remarkably easy to use. And it takes less than 30 seconds.
I'm Rex Murphy. This is Cross Country Checkup.
We've turned into a nation of thankless whiners.
Eric, go ahead.
I'm one of those guys gagging out here in this old
Cross Country Checkup, Sunday afternoon on CBC Radio 1.
Tell us what you think.
The week begins on Sunday, and Sunday Report will give you the information that you need to begin your week, and perhaps even tell you a little bit about the news stories that you're going to see develop over the course of the days to come.
Sunday Report with Allison Smith on CBC Television.
Back to Ottawa. Welcome back to Ottawa, home of the scenic Rideau Canal, just across the road from the site of this weekend's Amateur Sports Summit. And, of course, welcome to our special on the future of amateur sports in this country. Just before the break, we revisited the Sydney Olympics, where Canada won 14 medals. Many believe Canadians were disappointed by that result. But were they? CBC Sports and CBC News World, along with the Toronto Star and La Presse newspapers, conducted a poll from April 16th to the 22nd. Decimo Research asked 2,000 Canadians how they felt about their country's performance in Sydney, and here are some of the results. It turns out most Canadians weren't that hard on our Olympic athletes. Of those people who had an opinion, 9 out of 10 were fairly satisfied with Canada's results in Sydney. 13% said Canada's performance was excellent, 47% described it as good, and 28% called it okay. Only 11% said it was poor or very poor. Then we asked people just what they meant by the success at the Olympics. Again, we found most Canadians are not obsessed with medals. Most, 48%, define success as the number of athletes who recorded personal bests. 27% did measure success by the number of medals won. 20% classified success in terms of top 10 finishes. Looking at these results, you might think Canadians aren't that worked up over how Canada does at the Olympics. Well, not so. Our poll asked people how much importance they place on Canada being successful at the Olympics. 26% said it is very important, and 47% said it is somewhat important. 9% were neutral on the issue, while 18% of those polled said it was not very or not at all important. These results are considered accurate within 2.2 percentage points. That's 19 times out of 20. So that is what people had to say. But what about those who were representing Canada in Sydney or former and future Olympians? Well, Mark, I know you have some of them with you at the conference center.
That's right, Nancy. Here's our first panel of the day. I'm joined by Michael Chambers, elected only last weekend as president of the Canadian Olympic Association. Angela Schneider, a rowing medalist at the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. She is now an assistant dean at the University of Western Ontario. Jody Holden is a beach volleyball player who competed in Sydney and is now promoting Toronto's bid for the 2008 Summer Games. Mitch Geller, Canada's national diving coach. And seated next to Mitch, Marion Limpert, a silver medalist in 1996 in Atlanta, was also competing in Sydney. And rounding out our panel, Terry Godzowski, the president of Bob Sleigh Canada. Marion, I'd like to start with you because your comments in Sydney about the ills and the woes of Canadian sport really came flooding open. It opened the floodgates, so to speak, with a lot of coaches and athletes in Sydney. But the problem of athletes and poor funding has been a problem that has existed a long time in this country. Why do you think you and the others in Sydney struck a nerve?
Well, to be honest, I didn't even realize that I'd struck a nerve at the time. I guess I was actually really surprised the next day when I had all these media requests for people wanting follow-up interviews. I think probably just because, I think it probably hit home so much just because people were a little bit disappointed with the way the Canadian team was performing. And so, you know, we're finally sort of taking notice and being like, what is the matter? What's been going on? You know, I think perhaps in 92 and in 96, we still, you know, had pretty good performances, came home with a lot of gold medals, but, you know, we didn't exactly have that showing in 2000. And so I think that finally made people think that, you know, we've really got to do something here.
So was this frustration? I mean, did you see this coming? Did you know that this would be a down games for Canada?
Certainly not. No, I mean, as an athlete, I mean, you think you're going to go in there and, you know, I mean, obviously you're hoping that everything's going to work out well. I mean, I thought I was going to swim well, and I mean, I did set 6 Canadian records, but unfortunately, you know, compared to the rest of the world, that just wasn't good enough.
Exactly. Jody, I remember your debut with Conrad in beach volleyball. Tremendous victory on national television over Hydran Wong of the USA, who went on to win the gold medal. Great start, but what about getting there? I mean, was that the toughest competition of all?
Ideally, for all the Canadian athletes here, the hardest goal is to reach the dreams that you've set in front of yourself. Winning that game, the onset game against the Americans, meant everything to us, and we thought we had some great momentum and had a chance of actually stealing one of the medals at the games. But it's not always about winning medals, and what we're here today, what we would like to sort of get across to the public is that Canadian athletes aren't crying that they don't have enough money specifically to win medals. We're just saying we just want the chance to go out there and do what we've sacrificed our whole lives towards.
What about the situation, though? I mean, you found yourself almost in a perverse situation where you went to the Pan Am Games in Winnipeg, won a gold medal for Canada. You missed some qualifying points on the international volleyball tour, and because of that, you had your funding cut.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cruel world sometimes, and it's hard to understand why some of the decisions come down the way they do. But we set ourselves up as best as we could, you know, winning the gold medal, and we thought great simulation for what we had to do in Sydney. We were proud of our accomplishments to that, you know, at that point, but we wanted to go out there and do something really, you know, like set the standard for all other Canadian athletes who are chasing the same dreams and visions. Sometimes these decisions come down. It's hard on the athletes. Those documentaries paint a pretty bleak picture, but they are the reality that some of these athletes are training under, you know, poor conditions.
Right. Mitch, what do you think? I mean, should athletes be complaining the way they are? And what do you think of the $10 million boost that the government's coming up with in funding per year?
Well,
you know, a $10 million boost, it all depends on how it's going to be used. We don't know that yet, and we also don't know how long, you know, that will be sustained. And that's the big thing, is if you're going to set a long-term agenda, you have to know, you know, what you can expect on into the future. To throw, you know, some money at a problem, it may be temporary. And what I really look to, and I hope to see, is that money that's spent is spent with the idea that there'll be some long-term dividends, that we can invest in becoming more financially independent, move away from dependency on government, because I think we spend all our time trying to lobby, trying to talk to, you know, bend the ear of those decision makers. And I think that, you know, in sport, we really have to look to how to make it on our own.
Mr. Chambers, you've been on this job for about a week now. We saw in the documentary athletes complaining about the access to funds, especially the COA Legacy Fund. What do you make of that? I mean, should you loosen the purse strings a little bit more?
Every bit of income that we derive from that Legacy Fund goes to the support of athletes, either through their national sport organizations or scholarships or direct athlete funding. As Mitch just said, the decision was made years ago that if we want that fund to be there for generations to come, we're going to have to keep it in the bank and use the income only. I've been in enough sport organizations to know it's an easy, tempting attraction to take the principal, spend it, and then you've got nothing for the next Olympics you got to go for. The intention is to use that money on a regular, current basis so that we can have some certainty in the sports system with respect to funding, which is the only certainty there's been in the last little while, is a COA funding. It's coming because we know where it's coming from and it's certain.
Except you were able to dip in and cover off that $10 million loss in the lottery, and I think spend $3 million in legal fees. I mean, if you're able to spend that kind of money in that situation.
Well, we didn't dip in and spend $10 million on the lottery. We simply guaranteed the lottery against the principal was in the account, and the money was paid up, was repaid by the insurers when that action was eventually settled. The $3 million is a regular expense of the association in respect to legal fees. Didn't want to spend it, but had to spend it to get the $10 million back. And that came out of general operations, not out of the endowment fund.
Right. Well, let's talk about the situation as a whole then. Marion, you were talking about 6 personal bests, how they didn't stack up anymore. I mean, do personal bests in Canada rate? Have they been devalued? Are we at a competitive disadvantage in the world right now? Terry?
I think in some sports we may be, but you know, Jody said that you know, the video that was shown painted a bit of a bleak picture. What we have to keep in perspective is that that was one set of games at one point in time. Over the past winter, the winter athletes have had one of their most successful winters ever. We won something like 178 World Cup and World Championship medals this year, and I think something like 10 of them were in World Championships, and of course hockey is just starting today. I think that what we have to also understand is that the sports system isn't broken. It's not perfect. We have to work on it. We have to fix it. And 2 of the ways that we can fix it are getting all the players around the same table. And you hear this from the athletes, you hear this from the administrators, from the coaches. We have groups like Sport Canada, the COA, Calgary Olympic Development Association, the Canadian Coaching Association. What are the rest of them? There seem to be dozens of them. As a sport federation, I want to talk to one group that's going to set some parameters for me, tell me what you want me to do, I'm going to go out and do it, and I will be held accountable for it. So if we can get around the same table, that would be start number 1. Number 2 is let's tailor that approach to each individual sport. Why should Jody's funding be cut off because somebody thought of a cookie-cutter approach that worked for, you know, 30 other sports? Bobsleigh won a gold medal at the Olympics, wrestling, triathlon, speed skating. We all got there different ways, but we tried to box this all into one approach. It doesn't work. We have to fix it, but it's not broken. Just fix it and have an individual approach for us. That's what I would recommend. And people are starting to get around the same table, and that's been happening this weekend at the summit. That's been one real action item that's been happening this weekend at this summit. And an example of that is this pooling together of resources by CODA, the COA, federal government, and the 2010 bid committee in Vancouver, who at 1 week's time are going to sit around the table with some resources and decide how they can best spend those resources to help those athletes who can do well at Salt Lake City do well. And that hasn't happened as a collective effort before. Everybody would have made their own decisions, not knowing what the other person was doing, would have had duplication, would have had waste. I think that's a good step, and I think that's the first small step in a big step that's going to follow. We just have to keep the momentum going there.
Okay, we're going to take a break, panelists. We'll be back with our panel, our first panel on our Summit on Sports after a short break. Please stay with us.
4th. Go! Prepare to live the adventure.
Oh my God.
The Mummy returns at theaters Friday, May 4th. And get $10 towards admission for The Mummy Returns in theaters when you buy the original Mummy in the new Ultimate Edition Mummy DVD. Go behind the scenes with the stars of The Mummy Returns. Then save $10 when you see it in theaters.
The closest shave is as easy as 1, 2, 3, Mach 3. Easy loading, easy rinsing with no clogging, and 3 blades that shave closer in 1 easy stroke. Mach 3 from Gillette.
Soft spiked shoes, $120. Ball marker, $2. Putter, $280. No goalie, priceless. There are some things money can't buy. For everything else, there's MasterCard. Accepted everywhere from rinks to links.
It's about moving forward and not looking back. It's about designing the next generation of lawn tractors that not only cuts your lawn, but cuts it faster. Introducing the John Deere SST lawn tractor with spin steer technology. The only one to come with the technology to spin in place just by turning the wheel. The technology is so advanced, it actually cuts time.
Can't get a seat on the next space shuttle? Want to teach your computer to talk? I like it. Unlock the secrets of the CBC for Kids website. Get interactive, play games, enter contests, try a quiz, or just chat with other kids.
That's unbelievable!
Discover weird news from the world of science. Or how about creating your own newscast? From money sense on banking to the cutest pet contest. Find out the answers to questions you have and sign on with cbcforkids.ca.
Monday on CBC Radio.
Hi, I'm Sheila Coles. The Prince of Wales gets a lot of gifts when he goes on trips, such as the one to Saskatchewan. So what does he do with all his treasures? We'll find out Monday.
I've always believed that people who live in one part of Saskatchewan are always interested in what's happening in another part of the province, and that's what you get on our show. It's about Saskatchewan. It's Canada Now. Check us out.
Welcome back to Ottawa, home to the National Gallery and as well the site of the first National Summit on Sports. And as you can see behind me, the delegates have just about wrapped things up here, but there are many issues left to explore in looking at the future of amateur sports in this country. And for more on that, of course, we go back to Mark and we continue the panel discussion at the conference center. Mark.
Thanks a lot, Nancy. And joining us again, Michael Chambers, head of the Canadian Olympic Association, former Olympic rowing medalist Angela Schneider, and Jody Holden, an Olympic beach volleyball player. And to their side, national diving coach Mitch Geller, Olympic swimmer Marion Limpert, and Terry Godzowski of Bobsleigh Canada. You folks are being very polite. I know there's a positive energy in this city right now, but we've heard about the concerns and the problems in this sports system, and I'm not hearing it come out here in this panel. Angela, are you happy with the money, the increase in funding? Do you think, though, that the turf wars can be solved in this sports system?
Well, I think that there definitely was a positive movement towards collaboration here. And I also think that the message of the sport investment and being an investment for Canadians is being heard loud and clear, not only for the public to hear, but also the people in sport, because to make it an investment, it means it has to be a quality thing. And that doesn't mean just winning. That means human excellence, not just performance excellence. So it means that the quality of the sport has to be good sport. That's when it's an investment and not an expense.
So we shouldn't be throwing money at medalists or people who have a chance to win a medal right now, as we heard last week from Dale Henwood at the National Sports Center in Calgary, that they're going to target 20 athletes who were in the top 4, top 3, and they'll get the funding?
We definitely should be supporting the people towards pursuing their excellence. And there's no question about that. But what I am trying to identify is what makes it a valuable investment is our quality to our people, to our Canadians. And what do Canadians value? They value good sport. They value quality sport. Well, what does that mean? What that means is they care about the people for who the people are. And that is why they also care about personal best. That is why they also care about how we get there and the kind of people we produce. So yes, let's support them. But let's remember, it's not just straight medal wins we're talking about. It's quality and wonderful experiences we want to see as well.
What about the way, sorry, go ahead, Mitch.
No, I was going to say that, to me, I agree. I mean, that we would try to bring out the best in our people, and we try to develop our people, but it's so abstract and it's so immeasurable, and the basis of sport, I mean, if you put two kids in a playground and they run, it's still going to be trying to beat each other. And, you know, I mean, this is sport. This is what we do.
That's weird to think that we have this warring going on in Canada in the first place. You know, we could spend weeks and months trying to reevaluate everything that's happened in the past. It's no good. It's no good to point fingers at the COA and any of the other sport governing bodies. What we have to realize now is let's find out, let's try and study what we've done in the past. Obviously, it doesn't work as efficiently as we'd like it to work. And let's try and look at some other nations that have great, or use those as role models and try and figure out what we can do in Canada to improve our standings.
And it's not just one or the other, Terry. It's not just one or the other. It should not be thought that every time someone speaks of providing funding for our athletes who can win medals, that means those who are promoting that don't wish funding to go to those athletes who are developing. You have to fund both. But you can't ignore our athletes who are able to win for Canada at the Olympic Games. And to the extent they require funding, they should get the funding that they need. Remembering that you've got to be funding those who are coming up behind, or there won't be anybody coming up behind. It's not black and white.
But can we be all things to all people in this country? We praise the Australians. They decided they're going to be a summer sports nation. They put their money into summer sports. They won 58 medals. I remind you, they won 1 medal in Nagano. You know, we were per capita 6th in the world based on our 15 medals. So should we focus? Should we be a winter sports nation? I mean, that's where we have a lot of our excellence. What do you think? Can we be all things to all people?
We have great coaches in all sorts of sports. We have great athletes in all sorts of sports. We have great administrators in all sorts of sports. And I think if you went through the historical record, you'd probably find world champions or podium champions in any sport that we've ever participated in. So then the question is, why isn't it all happening at the same time? And that's maybe a systematic problem. But an important point that Angela brought up is that this is an investment. And when you have an investment, you want a return. Well, that return comes to you in a lot of different ways. And it's a winner at the podium. A winner is someone who meets the challenge. The challenge for a kid in a playground might be to, you know, participate in a soccer game, learn a skill. The challenge for elite athletes is to win medals. The challenge at elite athletes in a less mature program might be just to simply qualify for a world championship. So we have to take a tailored approach, create the challenges. Canadians love a winner, but you can win in a lot of different ways, and you got to remember that.
Okay, but how about the way we spend the money? $85 million last year, more than half of it was spent on the bureaucracy that runs sport. I know in your sport, Pierre Lueders had to sell a pair of his runners for $5,000 a year and a half ago just to help his teammates pay their rent back home. I mean, he's the Olympic champion from Nagano.
Absolutely. We expect, you know, when you put a pro team out on the field of competition, you expect them to win, but you've given them all the support you can give them to let them win. We expect our athletes to win when we see them in the games, but ask yourself, have we given them all the support we can give them to win? No. So why should we have that same expectation? You have to make the expectation commensurate with whatever you're providing. And I think that's where the system is a little bit weak, or a lot weak. Jody and Marianne would tell you about that.
Yeah, I don't think, though, that we've clearly identified that we want them to win. And I think that's a problem. The expectations aren't clear. I mean, we do have, there's a lot of sort of diverse opinion on that. And you know, Angela, you talk about, you know, building good people and those sides of it.
Good sport.
In sport, yeah. And I think that those are byproducts, you know, of going after doing something to the best of your ability and striving for excellence. You know, I've been running clubs for 13 years, and you know, I don't have any kids that sign up that don't sign up with the thought in mind that they want to be the best. They're not in it just for the experience.
And that's a good thing. And that's a good thing. People want to strive to be better. That's a wonderful thing. But how we get there is important too. The process we go through is really important, because that return on the investment is about contributing to civil society. And that's why the other areas are talking about contributing now. Who else do we have at the table now? We've got people coming from Health Canada talking about it, and there's been mention of other areas as well, the effect on other areas in crime that sport can have. And this we need to sell more in sport. We need to tell the people we're contributing to civil society.
We're too shy.
Yeah.
We're afraid to say we want to win, and then after we win, we're afraid to tell everyone. You know, and that's, you know, I don't know whether that's a Canadian problem, but let's go out and tell people how good we are. And let's not be afraid of it. And I don't think it's bad to tell someone you can be a winner.
Well, first of all, Terry, you know what, guys? Sorry to interrupt, Jody. On that point, we're going to have to call it a day on this first panel. Thanks very much for coming in here today and joining us in discussion. Now let's go to Nancy back at the summit. Nancy?
Mark, certainly interesting to hear the panel discussion on that. We are going to take a short break, but before we do more of your comments, we asked people whether they thought sports funding should focus on making Olympic champions.
Making more Olympic champions doesn't really benefit the population as a whole.
The question is, what do you sacrifice in the overall program in order to gain a few medals?
I can't say that it would be more important than education or more important than health care, but pretty important, I would think.
SaskTel high-speed internet today and save over $144.
What is it, boy? Somebody stuck in a well? Wendy. Wendy's stuck in a well? No. What about Wendy's? Their bacon mushroom melt is back? Nice. Come on.
When you get that craving for Wendy's bacon mushroom melt with 3 strips of bacon and mushrooms in a cheddar sauce,
We're taking a shortcut.
it's impossible to resist.
Thanks, I just
Wendy's bacon mushroom melt. When you gotta have one, you gotta have one. And now Wendy's pickup windows open late so you can eat great, even late.
See you later.
You know it's good for you. They say it will make you smarter. Come on, just one little taste. Try it. You might just like it.
The Saskatoon Opera Association presents The Magic Flute, May 19th, 21st, and 23rd in Castle Theatre. Tickets available at all select-a-seat outlets.
Good.
Sign up for SaskTel high-speed internet today and save over $144.
Is there room for more than one superpower in space? The United States doesn't seem to think so. Find out why next week on The National.
CBC Sports Saturday, where the action is, bringing you the very best in amateur sports from home and around the world. The rising stars and the seasoned greats. It all begins next week at noon Eastern on CBC Sports Saturday.
Welcome Welcome back to Ottawa and our Summit on Sports. The conference has wrapped up now, and we've been hearing a lot about Olympic athletes and their needs, but where will the stars of tomorrow come from? And are we doing enough to give them a chance to follow their dreams? Nancy?
Pretty clear the problem seems to be more than having a plan just to nurture future Olympians. Success in sports always has its beginnings at the grassroots level. That's where kids first get involved and get hooked on competition and learn a healthy lifestyle. But in financially tight times, sports are often squeezed out, and many kids lose their chance to play.
Here you go, Mint. Go with it, buddy. Go with it. Nice.
Yeah. Street hockey always seems a bit more fun in the spring, in the midst of the pro hockey playoffs. Unfortunately for the Mills Collegiate Hockey team in Toronto, they played way more street hockey this year than actual ice hockey games against other schools. They played 42 such games last year. This year, though,
we only played 6 high school hockey games this year because teachers weren't able to get involved as much with the sports. Good to hear it.
That's because the province of Ontario added an extra class to teachers' workloads this year. As a result, many teachers no longer organize and supervise extracurricular activities.
Teachers have no time after school, during school, to organize any sort of sports, any sort of teams, anything after school. Our coaches made the biggest effort possible, but it's still not enough.
For Banfield and the rest of the Titans hockey team, it isn't so much a loss of playing competitive sport. They still played rec league hockey, but only one. They missed the value that high school hockey added to their education.
School sports is a very important part to me. It's what takes you through high school. It really is. It helps you go through as an individual, as a teenager. High school sports, I feel, are necessary.
When you don't have what you need, you just improvise.
Over at the Dan Beardsley home, it's a budget cut that threatens the value of their kids' education. The local elementary school offers a swimming program as part of the school day. Rachel has gone through, and Amelia, Rose, and Max are currently in it. But the Toronto School Board wants to save $1.2 million and eliminate the 46 instructors that teach the program at a number of elementary schools in the city.
Education is about children learning. And so whether you're talking about cutting music programs, cutting sports programs, cutting lunch programs, it's people can say, oh, but you have to balance the budget. But at what cost? Because it makes our children, or it puts our children in a compromised position that they're not going to be the best learners that they can be. Here you go. Thanks, Mama.
Ontario's not the only place where sport is being devalued. In Manitoba, 60% of the elementary schools don't provide as much physical education as called for by provincial guidelines. Phys ed instructors say this happens because teachers feel pressured to use gym time for more academics.
There's been standards testing in math, language, arts, and science. There is no standards testing, and I'm not indicating that there should be in phys ed or music, but when those are on the plate for teachers and schools and school divisions, you know, there's obviously some reasons that, you know, they want their students to measure up across the divisions, and unfortunately it's been at the expense of those other programs, phys ed and music.
That sentiment is echoed in Nova Scotia. They don't even have such provincial guidelines there. Instead, individual schools decide how much phys ed they offer.
If you want to go into science, or you want to go into engineering, you want to go into economics, you want to go into psychology, universities, post-secondary colleges, etc., they don't ask for physical education. They ask for mathematics. So mathematics is perceived in our society as to be a much higher priority than physical education.
Physical activity doesn't seem to be a high priority among kids today either. A recent Statistics Canada study shows fewer kids are participating in sport. In 1992, 45% of kids 15 and older played some kind of sport. In 1998, just 34% did.
The kids are getting more progressively overweight.
Carl Georgeski doesn't need a study to tell him kids aren't as healthy as they used to be. He's been recruiting young athletes to the University of Toronto for almost 2 decades. That part of his job has become more and more difficult.
We find it extremely difficult to find the numbers of kids that we had at our disposal before. Back then, you had grade 10s, 11s, and 12s participating in physical and health education. And right now, you hardly have any kids that are participating in any kind of phys ed program after grade 9.
10 more seconds.
Dr. Norman Gledhill believes this increased inactivity has far-reaching social consequences. He says an unhealthy society is going to hit us right in the wallet.
The total health care cost directly attributable to physical inactivity is $2.1 billion, and that's a conservative estimate.
In stark contrast to Canada's big cities and provincial governments, there are places where sport is greatly valued. This is the Beardy's First Nations Reserve, about an hour's drive north of Saskatoon. 15 years ago, the Band Council decided to make kids in sports a priority and started putting money into facilities, coaching, and equipment. The investment paid off in a big way. These are heady times for the Beardy's Blackhawks. They're practicing for the biggest midget hockey tournament in the country. Their success is a reflection of this community's desire to embrace sport.
Sports is looked on as a character builder. It builds identity, it builds camaraderie, you learn to lose together, you learn to win together. It's the very game of life itself.
Rick Gamble is the former chief here and one of the forces behind the drive for more sports. He remembers what it was like before sport became such a big part of the community.
By and large, we became very complacent, and we didn't do a heck of a lot. And of course, as time went on, drugs started coming in, and alcohol, substance abuse, and things of this nature. And so it wasn't very productive.
And that temptation is still out there.
Maybe there would be drugs and alcohol in my life, especially growing up in the reserve. There's a lot of that going around reserve.
Instead, these kids will soon be playing for a national championship.
It means like my whole life to me. I really would like to make a career out of my hockey.
Kids are productive playing all kinds of sports in this community, and that productivity shows up in their schoolwork, says Derek Cameron, who also saw the value of sport years ago.
I think this year is the students from the high school here will probably turn over 80 to 90% of our grade 12 students will graduate.
Cameron says it's no mystery why sports has such a positive effect on education.
It teaches them self-respect. That's the biggest thing. You want the youth to have that self-respect so that, you know, when they come across certain obstacles in life as they become older, they'll know how to handle it. They'll know how to handle that adversity that comes with life.
That's not the only benefit sports has brought to this community.
And the thing I like about our youth is they take pride in their community buildings. You don't see any vandalism. They frown on anybody doing anything wrong, you know. So that in itself is a byproduct of the sports system. So.
No one has to convince Dominique Bosshart of the value of sport. For her, it adds up to a bronze medal in Taekwondo in Sydney. But before she kicked her way to the podium, she was just an angry kid kicking around.
I think I was, you know, that feeling of not belonging and being upset and sad about that, you know, at 10, 12, 13 years old, it made me mad. So I think I took it out on other people, on my teachers. When I started Taekwondo, that gave me something positive to put my focus on, and I got a lot of positive input from my instructors and that, so it led me to sort of better ways, I guess.
Bosshart says if sport can set her on a different path, it can do the same for others.
You spend a lot of energy doing sports, and I guess in a way that keeps you from spending your energy doing other things, which might be bad things, I don't know, but I think sport can help everybody.
And just a footnote to all of this, we can tell you that the Beardy's Blackhawks from the First Nations Reserve in Saskatchewan unfortunately didn't make it into the final round of that tournament, but even making it to the Nationals is a first for them. So, across the country, we do know a different kind of competition. The competition for tax dollars is fierce. If you spend money on sports, is there less for things like health care or education? And what do Canadians consider their priorities? Our Decimo research poll asked 2,000 Canadians how important it is for government to spend money on amateur sports. Of those who had an opinion, 30% said it was very important. and nearly half said it was somewhat important. 7% sat on the sidelines, while 15% felt funding for amateur sports was not very important at all, or not important or important at all. But when we asked people how the sporting pie should be cut, the result was, well, something of a revelation. Look at this. We asked people to choose from among 4 options. 44% of those polled said the focus should be on improving the general fitness of Canadians. 35% want more money to help kids participate in sport, and 16% think the money is best spent on building new public sports facilities. This is an interesting result. Only 5% say the best way to spend the sports dollars is on developing Olympic champions. So interesting results, and Mark, I know you have a group of people with you who have a lot of insight into these numbers.
Indeed they do, Nancy, and I'm joined by Charles Parkinson, who's Director of Sports and Recreation for the province of British Columbia. Angela Schneider is back. She's a former Olympic rower and now an Associate Dean at the University of Western Ontario. Kurt Harnett is a 3-time Olympic cycling medalist. He's now the Director of Business Development for the Sports Alliance of Ontario. Greg Joy won a silver medal at the 1976 Montreal Olympics and now spends a lot of time as a parent volunteer in sporting activities right here in the Ottawa region. Rita Gabani is president of the Canadian Association for Health, Physical Education, Recreation and Dance, or CAFERD, which promotes healthy lifestyles for school children. And Mitch Geller, Canada's national diving coach, has also returned for a second go-round on our second panel. All right, we've heard so many good things about the values of sport, physical education, getting our children involved in activity. Charles, I'd like to start with you. You're privy to what happens in caucus, in government decision-making situations. Why do you think that phys ed programs are the first to go in cutback fiscal situations?
Well, I think at the global level, if it's not high in the public consciousness, in other words, if it's not a big issue for people, then how can you expect it to be a political priority? And it doesn't matter if it's federal, provincial, municipal, or even at the school board level. If it's not identified as an issue for the people, if the people don't stand up and say, look, you can't do that, then you have to make choices, you have to make decisions. There are a whole number of priorities for all governments and for all decision-making bodies, and you just got to line those priorities up and make the hard decisions. But it has to be really high in the social consciousness.
So when they're sitting around a table and saying, we can't cut more hospital beds, we got to build that road, we can do without phys ed. I mean, nobody's really going to make a fuss. Is that what happens?
Well, that's kind of oversimplifying it, but yes, I think that, I mean, the results of physical inactivity are insidious. You don't see them right now. You see them 20 or 25 years later, and so it's an easy cut to make. People have to stand up and take this issue on and really let the decision makers know that it's an area that they need to protect.
We've just seen in the poll results how Canadians really believe that sport for children is so important. Angela, do you think, though, there's a problem within our governments where sport has been devalued?
I do think there's a problem. I think that also the use of the language extracurricular is a problem. This is core. This is core lessons for life. This is core to our health and our welfare as people, Canadians, and we really have to have that recognized by the government. And we've had a tremendous loss in this area, and it is time for people to stand up and say, we want this back, and we want this back not just for elite sport performances, but we want it back for the healthy value of our children.
So
go ahead, Mark. There's also a point that we should, I think, raise at this point in time as to whose responsibility that is to the children. And I think ultimately it's the parents' responsibility. Now, there's access and facilities and funding matters with programs that exist, but lethargic children are trained. We're in a society where we, as individuals, as parents, need to take the responsibility to understand the value of physical education to our children and what value they will take with that, and that value will support for them in their future. And we need to understand that as well. It's really a point that I think we need to make.
Greg, you've seen both ends. I mean, you won the silver medal back in Montreal in 1976, and now you're a parent yourself. You see what's happening in schools and in youth sport programs. You've heard the poll results, too, that the Canadians think it's important. Yet why do you think there continues to be decreased funding and a decreased importance on youth sport?
Well, I think what's happened in the past 10 to 15 years is the governments have really had to face this budget issue. We overspent for a number of years, and now we had to catch up for a number of years. And finally, we've caught up, and we're I think, in a fortunate position right now where we can make the choices that sport is important, and we can start to spend some money on it. However, I think the positive thing in the meantime is there's been some really strong grassroots development away from government. We have a ski club here, our cross-country ski club, probably the largest in the country for kids. We have a canoe club that's doing very well. We have lots of grassroots things happening from parents' initiatives. I think now if we can complement that with some school support, quality daily physical activity is so important, with good financed local programs for high performance development, and you put it all together now, I think we have some huge potential in the next 10 to 15 years to turn this whole ship around and make it very, very successful.
Rita, what do you think about what's been going on in our school system?
Well, I'm really frustrated. School is the one place where all children go, whatever their culture, whatever their gender, whether they're able-bodied or disabled. It's the one shot that we have to offer opportunities for physical education to all students. And I'm not just talking playing games, physical activity. I'm talking physical education, where children are taught fundamental motor skills so that they learn skills and competencies so that they can then move on into intramurals to practice it and into school sport competitive situations, and hopefully into the sports system, into the provincial and municipal sports systems, and hopefully some of them will move into the same place as these athletes sitting right here. But it's not valued. I mean, everyone says, yeah, we know the health of our children, but they don't demonstrate that value by either extending the time in school or providing the personnel to teach. And I think that our view of physical education is a broad one. It has to be inclusive, and it's one that includes an instructional component, intramurals, and school sport, and I don't see it as an extra. When I see what's going on in Ontario, it just makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck.
We heard in the documentary how children feel under pressure to get their math and their science, and there's this drive to get the marks, but there are studies which show that the sport does not affect adversely education. In fact, it helps in many cases.
Absolutely, and it's not more math they need, it's better math. And I'm sure if you took 5 minutes out of every class, I'm sure 5 minutes of every class throughout the day is wasted or is not used productively. And if you took 5 minutes from each class each day, you could provide every child with a half-hour of physical education without taking away from anything else. In fact, it would enhance it.
We seem to respond, to cost rather than value.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems to be the way that we operate as a society. I mean, an interesting statistic is that $100 million were spent last year on smoking education.
Yeah.
And if it was 100% successful, you'd save $5.7 billion out of the healthcare system. Well, if you were 100% successful in physical activity, you'd save $18 billion.
Yeah.
And yet, what do we pump into it in order to get people thinking along those lines? It's just because it's costing us so much that now we're finally reacting to it. We haven't crafted these great arguments.
Yeah, but our children, Canadian children, education is a provincial responsibility. Health and justice and all these other things are federal. And so we're saying, okay, the health system will deal with them when they're ill, and the justice system will deal with them when they're incarcerated, and they'll invest dollars at that point in time. And I think that what's going to happen, hopefully through Minister Kader's efforts, is that we'll try and do some bilateral agreements and work with the provinces to invest money. But they're Canadian kids, they're not provincial kids or federal kids.
It seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, but, you know, it's still, I mean, everybody's talking around looking to the government to provide the solution. And I agree with what Kurt said, that, you know, parents have to be aware that first and foremost, it's their responsibility. We understand that, you know, human nature is such that there's a tremendous amount of currency placed on physical aptitude. That's the way it is. That's the way kids get recognition from their peers. They're not going to get all the recognition from and strive to get the best math marks because that's the kid that's the most popular in school. We know that, and we can harness that, but, you know, even with schools cutting back, the private sports clubs or the non-profit sports clubs, they have limited access to even go in and provide the programs that the schools are lacking now.
Right.
I mean, there's a big restriction there.
There's a province in this country that spent more money on antacid pills in 1 year than it did on sport, and there seems to be something out of whack when something like that happens. We're going to take a short break here in Ottawa. We'll be right back with more on the state of elite sport in Canada. Please stay with us.
Wallpaper does not scare me.
I can do pretty much anything.
I hate this picture.
No job is too big.
Home Depot makes it easy.
Go home with the right tools and you're done.
I made it beautiful.
How do you know so much?
I'm a gardener, I'm a plumber, I'm the floor tiler.
Gone.
I'm a supervisor.
I turned my garage.
She's my hero.
Back into a garage.
This is my house.
This is why I
Go to the Home Depot first.
Home Depot. First in home improvement. From the leader in ride control technology comes a new standard in safety and control. Monroe's revolutionary Reflex with impact sensor technology that reacts instantly, shifting between firm and soft compression in just 12 milliseconds, combining superior comfort with a dramatic reduction in pitch and roll for maximum safety. Experience the new Reflex Shock from Monroe. And right now, you'll get a comeback certificate worth up to $140 with any qualifying purchase.
What is it, boy? Somebody stuck in a well? Wendy. Wendy stuck in a well? No. What about Wendy's? Their bacon mushroom melt is back? Nice. Come on.
When you get that craving for Wendy's bacon mushroom melt with 3 strips of bacon and mushrooms in a cheddar sauce,
We're taking a shortcut.
it's impossible to resist.
Thanks, I just got it cut.
Wendy's bacon mushroom melt. When you gotta have one, you gotta have one. And now Wendy's pickup windows open late so you can eat great even late.
See you later.
Feel the power of sound at the Master Series. Exciting guest artists join artistic director Earl Stafford and the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra to perform music from the world's greatest composers, both classical and contemporary. The Master Series with the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra. Feel the power of sound.
News that is comprehensive. Coverage that is incisive. Analysis that is thorough. Saturday Report with Mark Kelly.
Good evening.
Tonight on CBC. Cool, comprehensive, a daily newscast for kids.
You might just learn something.
Issues from Parliament Hill to the coffee shop. Weekdays at 4:50, immediately following the Magic School Bus. CBCNews.real on CBC Television.
Today, there's only one place to be, with all of your friends at Sesame Park.
It's really great.
Come play with Basil.
I'm so excited.
And don't forget Louie. Katie's here, and Dodie, and Chaos the kitten, too. Don't miss any of the fun, because you never know who may drop in.
I'm Goldilocks.
Huh? Goldilocks?
The one and only.
Sesame Park, weekdays at 11. Get set for life on CBC.
Welcome back to our Summit on Sports. This is a view of the historic Government Conference Center where Mark is standing by for another round with our panel looking at sport at the grassroots. Mark.
Yes, Nancy, our panel is poised and ready to go. We want to talk about solutions now at the grassroots level. What role do you think that community sport and school phys ed and sport programs, extracurricular programs, can play in grooming future champions in this country? Greg?
Oh, I think it's instrumental in any development. I mean, no matter what field you go into, if you don't have the basics, if people aren't exposed and don't have access, it's not going to happen. We lock the gates to our fields in this country because we're probably afraid of some liability insurance claim later on. I live across the street from a track, and you can't get on unless you pay a fee. We have to have more facilities, more access, and more opportunity for children to participate, because when they participate and they try everything, they fall in love with it. My wife and I are both Olympic medalists, so people say to us, what are your children going to do? What sport are they going to do? We say to them, we're going to provide them access, and if they fall in love with something, then they can excel. Otherwise, treat them to a healthy lifestyle, and hopefully the byproduct will be success in some field, be it physics or physical activity. Frida?
And that's what the physical education curriculum can do for children, and should do, and does do in many instances. Children are exposed to a wide variety of sports, a wide variety of activities, dance, gymnastics, as well as team sports, individual sports. And across this country in the last few years there's been new curriculum developed, which has got an emphasis on active living lifestyles as well as basic fundamental motor skill development. So the children are then able to pursue whatever dream they may have.
And when they pursue that dream, I mean, how do they get identified? Where do they go? We heard Marianne Limpert, telling us that she had to leave her hometown in Fredericton at age 17 and travel all the way to Sudbury with her mother. Their family had to split up. Is that the right situation, Kurt?
You know what, there's also the point that we could take as community leadership, either through the development of a community sports council, a city sports council, or a regional sports council, and put the leadership right at the grassroots as to where these kids need to go. If they can't get it at school, if they can't get it in that environment, at least why not a sports guidance counselor in the school? Develop a whole new angle on it, or get the existing guidance counselor, understand where the sports clubs are. I mean, if we have to rely on certain sectors, sometimes they're not going to be so successful. But if we get the proper leadership in place at the level that it needs to be, most athletes have had that, where a coach in the school got me involved in the sport of cycling, and it was a step after step after step that I escalated because the right people were in place at the right time. Not because of an outstanding system, not because of an outstanding infrastructure, because of the leadership of coaches, leadership of quality individuals.
Right. And they've talked about a couple of really important things. I mean, we have an aging infrastructure in this country. I mean, many of our facilities were built 25 years ago. And not only are they aging, you can't get into them. So what we need to do is look at what we've got and how can we better use it. What do we need? Kurt talked about the leadership. Who are the people? You know, and what kind of programs are they running? And do they have the resources to be successful? I mean, there are 3 or 4 things we need to layer on to start to address this problem.
I was just going to say, I do think that the community level is the most important, because that's where the kids feel the most direct recognition. That's where their peer group is, and that's what keeps them in sports. But I don't think that we can wait for children to drift into the sport of their choice. I don't think they make decisions that young. You can see what they show aptitude in, and things that they feel that they make progress in, that they have achievements, they will find, I like to avoid fun, but fulfillment out of what they do, and I think parents have to make decisions for them too.
What about sports schools? I mean, Quebec has been great in that area. They've got something like 22 sports schools now where kids can get their education and spend half the day focusing on their sport. And I know that the idea of nationalism in sport was taken off the table this weekend to appease Quebec, because they were concerned about sport and national unity in this country and issues such as that. But, I mean, they've been successful at it, at using sport as a nationalistic tool of feeling proud about their athletes. Should we do the same?
I think, what about, not necessarily about the creations of sport schools, but what about the creation of sport in school? In the existing infrastructure. Let's talk about quality daily physical education, the right tools, and let's do what we've all agreed to do, and that's take the preface of co and drop it from the curriculum of co-curriculum activities, and that does include arts and cultural type of activities, not just sport, but sport is inclusive of that, because this will give the tools to the children for them to succeed in life, and not to become Olympic champions, but to become Canadian champions in whatever right they're in.
And I would
there
even
are
argue,
Olympic champions out there that aren't being provided the opportunity to take part in the sports that they can be champions in. And I think it's really important to provide access, opportunity, and exposure to the children through the school system, through the community system, through all the various mechanisms possible that these children understand what they can be and fall in love with something and be passionate about it.
We've got about 30 seconds left. You come away from this summit feeling positive that things are going to change, that our kids are going to get more sports, they're going to get healthier. Charles?
Well, you know what we need are some concrete next steps. And that's the one thing that I hope will come out of this. I haven't seen anything yet, and I hope that the group that writes up this material says, this is what we're going to do, this is who's going to do it, and this is the date it's going to be done by. I don't think if we get there, it's not going to happen.
All right, Charles, and the rest of our panel, thank you very much for your contribution here this afternoon. When we come back, we'll take a look at some Canadians who aren't waiting for Ottawa to fix the system.
Story is coming up as we continue with our Sports Summit coverage. Stay with us.
Choose road. Validating tires.
BF Goodrich tires with traction advantage.
Approved.
control you can feel and see. BF Goodrich Tires. Take control.
We're back. Bill, your whole business is going wireless. Can you retool to keep up? Well, Bob, we have an 18-month infrastructure plan. My guess, you've got 6 months tops. Can you do it? Well, we're evaluating several options. Can you say right here, right now, that you'll be wireless ready in 6 months?
Uh-oh. Don't do it, Bill. Remain calm.
Well, if we need to do that, we can do that. There you go. The street's going to hold you to that, Bill.
And that's when it hits you. You are so ready for IBM.
Oh, Bill.
It's Mazda's Spring Breakthrough.